tried to escape when I went away to drama school, but when you drive down the A46 from Newark and you see the cathedral in the distance, that thing of like, I'm back. I'm back where I belong. We exist to make space for you as young people to be heard. We've lost about 4,500 youth workers. And so it's a national narrative, but it's very apparent in a smaller city like Lincoln, and assume you know exactly what they're going through, but actually we don't. Creating actual spaces for young people to exist. Over 900 visits over the course of the summer. Incredible. I remember really vividly going to pantomimes at Lincoln Theatre Royal, and that being my like gateway.
Young people at the heart of this.
Across the breadth of the organisation, youth voice is really, really there, and they genuinely have a proper say. And I opened the door and it was one of the young people that used to be part of my youth theatre, and he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Why are you at my door?"
In this latest episode of Hey Lincoln, we hear from Toby Ealden from Zest Theatre, celebrating the 17th anniversary of its foundation, his desire to come back to Lincoln to work in this community, and his passion for giving young people a voice. Okay, right. Well, so welcome to another Hey Lincoln podcast. And today it's a real pleasure to have Toby Ealden from Zest Theatre with us today. Hi, Toby.
How you doing?
Good. And on the day we're recording this, I understand it's actually the 17th birthday.
Which I always forget. It was my team that were like, "It's in the calendar, it's the birthday, like we're not going to do anything." So we're not having a party this year. 17 doesn't feel like
it's not like one of those big ones, is it?
No, we've shared some photos. It's worth marking for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant. So tell us a little bit about Zest Theatre and how it got set up and how you got to your 17th birthday.
Zest is now a registered charity. We're also what's called an Arts Council national portfolio organisation. So we're part of a portfolio of about 900 organisations across the country that receive core funding. But it didn't start like that. So I was 25. I'd been made redundant from a previous job that I had worked in, which again was in the kind of the youth arts sort of sphere. That project shut. There wasn't really anything else like it in Lincolnshire. So I kind of took the punt that I would just give it a go and see if I could make a thing happen. And then here we are 17 years later. And now there's a strategy. Now it feels like we know what we're about, we know what we're doing, but not so much back then.
It's been a bit of a slow burn to get to that point where you've got a strategic approach.
And at the beginning it was just about like, how do I just keep myself in some sort of work, which means that I don't leave this place. So I've lived in Lincoln since I was 2. I did go away and try to escape. I thought I was going to escape when I went away to drama school, but came back.
Somehow the cord pulled you back to the city.
I think that does happen a lot though, doesn't it? And I realised I guess I realised in COVID time that I was still in this world of like fighting and thinking I was going to leave, and this was it. And I think I've just realised I'm here. Like I am here, and I'm supposed to be here. I've just got to accept it, and that's a good thing. Here. And not even just accepting it, like I'm actually happy about that. Good. Whereas I think for a time I kind of wondered whether there was stuff for me elsewhere, and now I've realised that Lincoln is where I'm supposed to be, and probably always was where I was supposed to be. I just needed to get used to that idea.
Get used to that idea and settle into it. So, I mean, the arts and culture scene in the city has changed so dramatically, not just in the last 17 years, but I would say over the last 25, 30 years. It feels to me that it's grown and developed, and there's so much activity now. Yeah,
and one of the reasons that I think when I was the younger version of myself had that desire to want to escape was because it felt like there weren't opportunities here. That there were things going on. I remember really vividly going to pantomimes at Lincoln Theatre Royal, and that being my like gateway into this industry. I was just fascinated by that, even as a tiny kid. But it did feel like there weren't a huge range of opportunities, and if I was going to like make it, whatever that really means, it wasn't going to be here. And now I'd like to think that the sector is growing, and so those students that come out of Lincoln Uni actually can increasingly see that there is stuff for them to do. And but it's quite a broad sector when you think about what's happening in the city.
Absolutely.
With that kind of the commercial venues like the Theatre Royal through to independent organisations like us, and festivals like Frequency Festival, the developments that are happening over at Lincoln Arts Centre, the uni, the way the drill has changed and evolved over the last few years. There's a much wider offer than there used to be.
And I mean, you mentioned the university there. I mean, I think that's one of the really positive things, that as the population of the city has changed, more young people have come here. We seem to be getting more visitors now. They want more. They're looking for something with more variety. And as you say, that all of those venues, we've got a really active arts and cultural scene, but so much more to do. So tell us a little bit about Zest. What is it that Zest does?
So we're a registered charity. And I guess I explain that to young people when I meet them. I explain that we exist to make space for you as young people to be heard, because the world often doesn't listen to you. So we're here to listen, to understand. And from that listening, understanding those conversations, we make stuff to help tell that story. And that stuff could be theatre shows that tour to venues or outdoor festivals. It could be public art installations where we take over town centres with the words of young people to bring kind of colour and vibrancy to those places. Or increasingly, in terms of the work we did last summer with The Zone, creating actual spaces for young people to exist that are often lacking in places like Lincoln.
So tell us a bit more about The Zone, because I do remember seeing that in the city.
So 2 years ago, 2022, the City Council and the university asked us to go and meet young people across the city, and we set ourselves the target of meeting 10% of Lincoln's young people.
Wow.
So we met about 1,500 young people across about 50 workshops in schools, colleges, community groups, using the same process that we use when we're developing shows of opening up conversations, recording what they say, capturing their thoughts through writing and different activities. And from that, a series of themes emerged. We were asking them about what they wanted from the future of Lincoln, what they envisaged Lincoln would be in 10 years' time. And from that, we really realised that one of the key themes was the lack of space, that there are very few youth spaces in the city. And actually, that's a national story over the last 14 years. It's something like 750 youth centres have shut. We've lost about 4,500 youth workers. And so it's a national narrative, but it's very apparent in a smaller city like Lincoln. So we were like, well, we create these stage designs. We're used to building structures and making cool looking things. We create installations for people to come and hang out in public spaces. It's not that much of a step to think about making a youth centre. At least it felt really easy to me. And so my brain took me to a place where I could begin to envisage what that might look like. And so The Zone was born. We received funding from the National Lottery Community Fund, which is also partly funded by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And we consulted young people about what they wanted that space to be. And so The Zone was created as a place for young people to chill, to create, to be themselves, a place where they can come for free and just hang out and do usual kind of youth club stuff, play on PlayStations, play table tennis. But if they wanted to try their hand at some kind of creative activity, get involved in making, it was there as well. And often young people came, they came to hang out and find themselves accidentally trying their hand at these other activities. We had over 900 visits over the course of the summer. And a third of those young people had never taken part in arts and culture before. So it was a really brilliant, successful, just life-affirming project, really. And it's back again in 2025.
I was going to say, was it a one-off, but it's coming back?
Yeah, so we received 2 years of funding, so it's definitely back in Lincoln in 25. And then the work begins now to look at how we support that from 26 onwards, because it just works. And so we don't want it to go away. We work really hard to make it look outstanding. And we're really building those relationships and trust with young people in the city now, hence why we've got these huge numbers. So we want to build on that and keep that going and not let it be a hit and run exercise.
I think it's really interesting because we're talking about young people. I mean, when we say young people, what sort of age range are we?
In the case of that project, we're talking 11 to 18, but Zest as an organisation would work from anywhere from 9 years old up to 25.
Right. Because, a lot of the young, we were all affected by lockdowns and the restrictions on life, but I think for young people that was particularly difficult. And so opportunities now to start to come together. Yeah. I mean, lockdown's sort of long in the history, I know, but I think the impacts really of it
are going to be felt for a long time. So there's a stat about mental health with young people, which in 2017, there was 1 in 9 young people faced a probable mental health condition. And now that's risen to 1 in 5. Yeah. And COVID's a massive, the lockdowns are a massive part of that. Those young people were, like all of us, asked to shelter and protect older, more vulnerable people. But in doing so, they lost formative years of their life. And lots of young people who are now in their early 20s, missed out on those rites of passage, like going to your prom or even like results day, freshers week, if they've just gone to uni. And that does have an impact on those moments begin to help you create who you are as an adult. And when you don't have those moments, those mountaintop kind of experiences, something is lacking.
Kind of leaves its mark, really, doesn't it? And I think that's why projects like the Zone are so important, because it is actually giving young people that opportunity to express themselves. And as you say, the world isn't very kind and often not very generous at letting young people do that.
I think young people are just really different from the generations have gone before. Their experience of teenage life is very different from my experience of teenage life.
Which was very different from my experience, because there's a bit of
I now have
there.
A teenager in my own house, and I see that all the time, and it's very easy to see what they're going through this kind of hormonally driven years, and assume you know exactly what they're going through, but actually we don't. I didn't have the experience of social media and the pressure that brings in the palm of my hand. Absolutely. Like they do. And also, like, socio-politically, the world was very, very different. The opportunities available to us as like I was a teenager of like New Labour, the opportunities available to me were very different to now. And all of that does have a massive impact on young people.
It certainly does. You talked a lot about partnerships here and working. I mean, the fact that Zest is now a national portfolio organisation is really good. I think that's that recognition by the Arts Council of the value of what you do. But can you talk a little bit about some of the other partnerships, perhaps locally or nationally, that you're involved with, and those organisations, how they support the work of Zest?
Yeah, so we've just gradually, I guess, over the last 10, 12 years, began to build relationships across the country. And that started by thinking about making work in Lincoln, which then led to work across Lincolnshire and then the region and then beyond. And so now we work right across the breadth of the country. We could be anywhere from like Teesside all the way through to like Barnsley, Lincoln, down into Kent and Medway, some parts of London. And that's all driven by relationships. Often it starts with relationships with arts organisations like theatres and venues. But because they're so connected, that soon results in us building new relationships with local authorities or other kind of commissioning partners. And things like the Zone or the other projects we do, particularly the work in public spaces, can only really happen through those partnerships that make that work and really drive that work. And,
you know, it's obvious from what you're saying and from what I know about Zest that young people are at the heart of this. This isn't something you're doing to them, but something you're doing with them, and they're part of I think that's the delivery.
The key really is we can only be good at our job because we understand, and the only way we understand is by learning and listening, and that listening really enriches everything that we do. We've always served young people and we've always involved young people in creative processes. But when COVID hit and we kind of went into lockdown and we furloughed, we had an opportunity through cultural recovery funds from Arts Council to be able to really rethink what we were and how we worked. And so we decided that it wasn't enough just to have young people influencing the creative product we were making, the shows, the productions, but they should also influence the organisation. So in COVID, we established a youth advisory group of young people. They were all young people that have been involved in our projects before across the country, who meet us in a paid consultancy position. Wow. They meet us once a month on Zoom. We pay them to be there. And they get their hands on everything from the policies and procedures through to programming. They get their final say on who gets jobs at Zest and who doesn't. Oh. So they genuinely do have a say on the organisation. And this year, January 25, we'll be appointing 2 of those young people as trustees as well. So across the breadth of the organisation, youth voice is really, really there, and they genuinely have a proper say.
And I think that is so important. It's really positive to hear you say that, because so many boards of trustees of organisations, even those working with young people, are made up of, well, people like me, grey-haired old men. And it is really important that we find ways for young people to be involved and have their voice heard. So is part of what you're doing about creating opportunities for them to go into arts and culture for work, to keep people in the city, to encourage them to think about the role they can play in their community?
Yeah, it's all of that, and I guess and more. So I suppose that the creativity, the theatre, the culture we make is a vehicle to be able to engage young people and allow them to become the people they want to be. And some of that will mean that, they will be the artistic leaders of the future. Hopefully some of them take over my job. Those trustees we've appointed actually are legally responsible. They are my employers now. So if they could get rid of me if they wanted to. So some of it is about that. But also we have young people that volunteer with us just because they just like the energy and they want to learn some skills and they want to push themselves. We had a guy called Rustam who volunteered with us in the zone over the summer. He was one of the involved in one of the focus groups in one of the schools that we worked with at Priory Witham Academy. And he asked some really challenging questions when we were devising the project, particularly around how we include ethnically diverse young people. And he was like, are you going to create volunteer opportunities? And I was like, well, we haven't got plans for it, but should we? And he was like, yes. And I was like, well, are you going to join then? He was, yes. And there he was, like 3 or 4 days a week volunteering. He's not he wouldn't say himself he's a creative person. He's not got a desire or an interest in necessarily being an artist, but he just wanted to support the project and support other young people like him to be able to engage. And actually him being there made a massive difference to the type of people that were coming to that project in terms of them feeling safe to be there.
And that's really important, because I think it can also play a part in breaking down some of the barriers between generations as well. Because I think if older people see young people being involved and doing something positive in their community, then perhaps that helps to bridge that gap, which is one of the problems I think we have in some of the communities across the city.
That was certainly our hope with the zone, that we could create a space right in the city centre where young people could be and they could feel safe in the place that they live in. They would know that they were allowed to be there, and that I guess the grown-ups of the city would then get used to this idea that, teenagers can be present here, and they don't, yes, they are loud, because that's part of teenage life. They're going to be loud, and sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it's a little bit chaotic, but in the right setting with the right support, actually that can be a really beautiful, uplifting thing. And it feels like the city really embraced that project. Certainly the traders in the market were amazing. They were giving us free ice cream and free bubble teas to give to the young people. They were providing us with vouchers so the young people could get cheaper food from them. So they really, the whole kind of square there in the city square really embraced the project. And we didn't get any complaints. So that's like always a good sign.
Well, that's always a good sign. That is a positive. Yeah, no, if people aren't complaining, you're probably doing something right. So you must have seen, over the 17 years that you've been in existence, you must have seen some of the young people who were with you in the early days who are now themselves adults. Are you seeing their children come into quite
sometimes?
Must be a bit
that's
odd.
The jarring thing when you're out in town and then you hear this person calling you and you turn around and then they are there with a pushchair. It's quite unnerving. It makes you realise quite how long I've been doing this for. I'm now on my 3rd generation of teenagers that I'm working with, which is, it is kind of mind blowing. I guess the most enjoyable thing for me is when those young people crop up in really unexpected ways. I had, a few years ago, we were having a house that we owned down Monks Road renovated, and the whole outside of the house was being re-rendered. And that morning I had to get up to welcome the guy who was going to do like the rendering. And I opened the door and it was one of the young people that used to be part of my youth theatre. And he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, why are you at my door? And he was the plasterer that day. Right. And actually his life story was really chaotic. He had a lot of challenges, but that youth theatre experience just gave him a grounding and the confidence to be able to overcome some of those hurdles. And he's not working in my industry anymore, but he's thriving in his own sector with that job. And you kind of wonder, where would he have been if it hadn't been for that time involved in that project and having those experiences?
Positive impact. And
actually he was an amazing actor.
The confidence.
And I would have loved to have seen him be an actor, but he's ended up being a plasterer and he's happy and he's there and he's healthy and his story could have been very different.
Right, that's really good. So what next? What are your plans for the future? Where do you think, in 17 years' time when you hit your 34th birthday, where do you want Zest to be?
Thinking, I am actually older than that. I thought you were saying I was 34.
No.
I kind of struggle, I guess, a bit with those sorts of questions in a way, because there's been so many curveballs over the last few years. We've talked about COVID. Yeah. And because we're publicly funded, the twists and turns of the political environment always impact our work as well. So I find it hard to answer. And the other reason I find it hard to answer is not because there's always uncertainty, but because we genuinely serve young people. You never know what the next thing is going to be or the next challenge they're going to face is or the next kind of trend they would want us to serve. I would just hope that we're meeting more people serving more people, that we're still open and curious and asking questions and always being ready to change, I guess. We started as a theatre company, and now it's quite hard to describe sometimes what Zest is. I know very clearly what our mission is, but if you'd asked me pre-COVID whether I'd be touring a pop-up youth centre, I would have laughed, because why would I do that?
Yeah.
But here we are, evolving out of theatre touring into public art, into youth spaces, and who knows where it could go next.
No, that sounds really positive, and I can understand that ability to flex to the needs of young people is going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
So Toby, that's been really good. It's well, happy birthday again.
Thank you.
We're asking everybody who participates in this to sum up Lincoln in one word, what the city means to them in one word. So your word would be?
Is it really basic just to say home?
No.
Because, and when I say, well, it's home because it's where I lived since I was 2, but it's that feeling you get when you drive down the A46 from Newark and you see the cathedral in the distance. That thing of like, I'm back. I'm back where I belong, where, in a place that's really nurtured and supported me. Even though sometimes I didn't think it was, it really has. Yeah,
and it's interesting, as you said right at the start, that you left, but you felt the pull to come back. Home probably is a really good summary for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Toby. It's been really, really interesting to hear your story, the story of Zest, and I wish you well for the future.
Thank you.